In 1991, this man was forgotten in space. He left Earth from a country that called Soviet Union. 10 months later, when he came back, that country did not exist anymore. I'm Vlad. This is 25 frames. 25 photographs you have never seen, with stories that nobody told you. One of them, number 22, shows a pilot who survived 22 minutes, hanging outside his own airplane at 600 kilometers per hour. Stay until then. Let's begin.
School buses are an essential element of any American teen movie, but perhaps they looked even more cinematic in the 1930s. A real house on Pizzuto's wheels. Skids, furnace, roof, all the right stuff to keep kids in the northern states from freezing on their way to and from school. Once Joe Biden has already withdrawn his candidacy from the presidential race. It happened in 1988 when the candidate from the Democratic Party was accused of plagiarism. It turned out that in his campaign speeches, Biden used fragments of speeches of British Labour leader Neil Kinnock. The photo shows Joe Biden's election campaign 36 years ago. The photo is like something out of a sci-fi movie. Airship USS Los Angeles ZR-3 takes off in the fog. USA, 1924. This huge machine was somewhat of an experiment of the American authorities. In 1928, it successfully landed on the deck of the aircraft carrier USS Saratoga. The airship ended its final service in 1939, and for reasons of profitability, not because of a crash in the case of airships. This is rare. The first and last. Soviet excursion, submarine Neptune, another super project with an unenviable fate. It would seem that the question why, initially was right on the surface. Underwater tourism in the USSR is difficult purely for geographical reasons. In the Black Sea, the water is murky, the fauna is poor, and in all other seas even more so. Still, the project decided to implement in 1990, built a mini submarine for diving to 40 meters. Technically, it was superior to foreign excursion submarines. And yet, its fate was not easy. The boat for $3.5 million suddenly turned out to be unprofitable. In 1996, the boat was sent to Severodvinsk, where it stood and rusted. They were not going to do anything with it, even a floating cafe. As a result, the boat is still standing in the Arkhangelsk region. Sergei Krikalev is a Soviet and Russian cosmonaut who was stranded in space during the collapse of the Soviet Union. The events began on May 18, 1991, when Krikalev went into orbit for the second time. He flew away from the country called the USSR, and when it was time to return, this state no longer existed. According to the plan, the cosmonaut was supposed to return to Earth in 5 months. But already during the flight it became clear, something bad was happening at home. As a result, another crew member, Anatoly Artsebarsky, managed to return to the Union, and Krikalev, as the only flight engineer, remained to continue work. The cosmonaut himself emphasizes, the decision was made voluntarily, and the fact that he was allegedly forgotten in space only a journalistic stamp. As a result, Sergei Krikalev stayed in orbit for 10 months instead of 5, and on March 25, 1992, landed already in the Russian Federation. By the way, Krikalev's flight was also notable for another episode in the comments. Sergeant Stubby is a WWI war dog. He warned soldiers of gas attacks and found the wounded. Stubby served for 18 months, fought in 17 battles and survived the war, passing away in 1926. The clash of the modern and traditional world, Vietnam, 1960s. The picture is idyllic. US President Bill Clinton and Russian President Boris Yeltsin admiring views of the Hudson River Valley. New York State, USA, 1995. It is believed that it was during this tour that Yeltsin negotiated a nice tranche with Clinton, which eventually helped make the results of the 1996 elections exactly as we know them. Well, maybe not. Who can tell now? Yuna Unso mercenary Oleg Chelnov, Grozny, the First Chechen War. As in Abkhazia, the number of Ukrainian volunteers in Chechnya was insignificant, but there were enough of them to seriously malign the federal forces with their Slavic appearance. For example, Oleg Chelnov from Kharkov sometimes disguised himself as a Russian officer in the midst of battle, infiltrated the opposite side and brought Russian soldiers into the line of fire. As an experienced Afghan, he knew all the subtleties of radio broadcasting, which he took advantage of by accessing the frequencies of Russian artillerymen and calling fire on his own, the Russians. He was liquidated in 1996. A queue for toilet paper in a Tokyo supermarket, Japan, November 1st, 1973. It all started when a Japanese minister went on TV the day before and asked Japanese people to use toilet paper more sparingly. The next day, hundreds of people lined up outside a supermarket in Osaka and bought up all the product. When this was reported in the news, other Japanese cities followed Osaka's example. On September 3, 1880, the first electric tramway in Russia and possibly in the world was demonstrated in St. Petersburg. The inventor Fyodor Pirotsky was an artilleryman by training, but he found his vocation not in the military, but in transportation technologies, for which we are very grateful to him today. It is believed that the brilliant idea to create transportation on electric traction came to Pirotsky during one of his walks with his friend, Pavel Yablochkov, the inventor of the arc lamp, Yablochkov's candle. Pirotsky spent the entire summer converting an ordinary horse-drawn carriage into an electric-powered streetcar car until he finally presented his work to the world. Electric carriage Dobrov 114 took the citizens on a month-long ride in the Christmas carriage park. Everything was serious and tight turns and braking and backing up. The speed was equal to a horse trot, and the length of the route was not great, only 85 meters. But it was definitely a colossal breakthrough in the technology of the time. Postmistresses of the USSR 1968. In the Union, the post office was literally a strategic object. Not only letters, but also telephone, telegraph, and radio in every region throughout the vast country. Once a year, the post office was also the place to subscribe to periodicals, which was the most important thing that could not be missed. And how many interesting and useful things people sent to each other in different corners of the USSR. From Bulgaria, Poland, or GDR stationery, and any foreign curiosities. From the south, vegetables, fruits, sweets, and regardless of where they lived, canned goods, sausage, mushrooms, chickens and geese, mayonnaise and many other goodies. And actually a traffic controller in London in 1935. Due to fog, he is forced to use a folding lighting device powered by mains gas.
Almost there. The Lancet story is coming. Don't stop now.
Ladies salute the British warship HMS Invincible, which returned after Britain's victory over Argentina in the Falklands War, 1982. On September 12, 1959, the automatic interplanetary station Luna 2 was launched from Baikonur Cosmodrome. It became the world's first apparatus to reach the surface of the Earth's satellite. And 3 days after this happened, another important event, Nikita Khrushchev visited the United States. This was the first official visit of a Russian leader to America after the trip of Sergei Witte in 1905. According to Khrushchev, the Earth was now lighter, and the moon was a few hundred kilograms heavier. Together with the apparatus, a container weighing 390 kilos with a pennant, and the flag of the Soviet Union was sent to the moon. Khrushchev gave an exact copy of this pennant to American President Eisenhower, and it is still kept in the Kansas Cosmosphere and Space Center. A total of 24 missions were launched as part of the Soviet lunar program. It seems like everything in the world is made in China. Even the winged lion of St. Mark is a famous symbol of Venice. Scientists used to believe that the bronze lion, which adorns a column in Piazza San Marco in Venice, was created in the 4th century BC in Anatolia, modern-day Turkey. But isotopic analysis of the bronze showed almost all of the sculpture was made in China in the 8th century. Experts found that the lion looks very similar to Zhenmuzhou's special statues that were used in China to protect tombs. Such lions had powerful bodies, wide nostrils and open mouths with fangs. Most likely, the winged lion came to Venice in disassembled form along the Great Silk Road. Originally, the sculpture even had horns, which were later removed to give the lion a more European appearance. September 17, 1665, in London, began the Great Plague epidemic, one of the most deadly diseases, killed 20% of the city's population. From 1665 to 1666, the disease spread at a catastrophic rate. The reason for this is the active urbanization of the British capital. The huge influx of population provoked an increase in the number of beggars who lived in complete unsanitary conditions, with rats and fleas. Add to this the lack of a sewage system, and there they are, ideal conditions for the emergence of infection. The healers of those times knew that the disease was extremely dangerous, but its causes were not understood, so they used literally anything that came to hand to treat it. The most common methods are bloodletting, cold, leeches, dried toads, fumigation of dwellings with smoke from herbs and spices. As you can guess, this not only did not help, but made the situation worse. Streetcars used to run along Red Square, and cars used to drive quietly until 1963. Streetcar tracks right under the walls of the Kremlin appeared in 1909, when the authorities decided to lay a new line to Paveletsky railway station. The nearest route was through Red Square and Zamosvorechye. The public transportation stop was literally a few steps away from the monument to Minin and Pozharsky. In 1930s, the streetcar traffic along the Red Square was stopped for grandiose parades. Participants in the oldest and most prestigious balloon race, the Gordon Bennett Cup, are about to start in Berlin, 1908. The first race was organized in Paris in 1906, and since then it has been held annually. The rules of the competition are as simple as possible. The crew that flies the farthest away from the starting point without a single landing wins. And it was not the balloonist who established the race. Gordon Bennett had nothing to do with sports, but he was a millionaire and owner of the New York Herald newspaper. On September 23, 1924, Leningrad experienced the second most destructive flood since its foundation. Perhaps that day the citizens really believed in the apocalypse. The disaster was accompanied by a bright northern lights. The strongest water pressure washed away the sidewalks, demolished passers-by, and in just 15 minutes completely flooded the square in front of the Exchange Building and the Admiralty Embankment near the Palace Bridge. Fortunately, the elements did not rage for long. In a couple of hours after the peak, the flood began to recede. The damage from the flood was huge. 16 people died. Among the victims were the already deceased residents of Leningrad. The newspapers wrote that the watchmen of the city cemeteries, coming to work in the morning, found about 20 washed-out graves, as a result of which the dead had to be buried again. Leningraders were saying that the flood was nothing but a heavenly punishment for the next renaming of the city. After all, back in 1914, it was St. Petersburg. During World War I, it was renamed Petrograd. And on January 26, 1924, it was renamed Leningrad. On September 19, 1991, while hiking in the Ostal Valley, German hikers Erich and Helmut Simon came across what they first mistook for the body of a recently deceased climber. However, it turned out to be a perfectly preserved mummy, later named Ötzi, which had been in the ice for more than 300 years. The mummy was surrounded by various artifacts, including a bow and quiver with arrows, a copper-bladed axe, a flint dagger in a braided scabbard, birch vessels lined with maple leaves, the remains of a backpack, a leather pouch with small items, as well as fur and leather clothing and shoes, and other small items. This incredible story took place 34 years ago. On June 10, 1990, BAC 1011 Captain Tim Lancaster was ejected from the cockpit when a poorly secured windshield ripped out. At the last moment, the aircraft commander was grabbed by one of the flight attendants. The second pilot managed to land the plane in 22 minutes. The passengers were not injured. Lancaster's rescue was considered nothing short of a miracle. He managed to survive after a 22-minute flight on the fuselage of the plane at a speed of 600 km/h and freezing to B-17. In addition to frostbite, Lancaster was diagnosed with a fractured right arm, wrist and finger on his left hand, as well as numerous bruises. After rehabilitation, he returned to flying 6 months later. Second and third photo. Reconstruction of the incident, National Geographic Channel documentary. The first photo shows Tim Lancaster and flight attendants Simon Rogers and Nigel Ogden. Perhaps one of the most unusual wedding ceremonies is the underwater marriage registration in Texas, 1954. Such a wedding decided to arrange a diver Bob Smith and synchronized diver Mary Beth Sanger. And the choice was made not only for the sake of epatage couple married literally in the place where they met for the first time. The guests, thank God, were not forced to dive for the ceremony, could be watched from a special waterproof capsule submerged in water. In order to stand confidently underwater, special weights were attached to the shoes and clothes of the newlyweds. Waxed cardboard was used to keep the groom's suit in shape. Donald Trump at his Mar-a-Lago, Florida residence in 1992. As of November 2019, the mansion is considered the formal permanent residence of the former president's family. In this residence, Trump, as President of the United States, held official meetings with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and Chinese President Xi Jinping. Photo of a jeweler and moneylender city, Kamenets-Podolsky, about 1870 to 1880 years.
That is 25. If even one of these stayed with you, subscribe. Next week we open the archives again. Some photographs deserve to be remembered. I'm Vlad, see you in next one.